Welcome to Fourth and Frames. I'm your host, Chris Battistel, and I am joined, as always, by my co-hosts, Rhett Manuel and Drew Scott. And tonight, we put our Dynasty rankings up against the boss man himself, special guest, Jorge Edwards. Let's get it.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
All right, like I mentioned at the top, we have the king of sacks, the titan of tackles, the colossus of corners, the sultan of safeties. He's on a 3-hour run tonight. Just before this, he was on Dynasty 365, and right after, he's on Shoot the Gap. You can find him talking about everything fantasy football on Fantasy and Frames, as well as his wrestling podcast, the boss man, the head honcho, Jorge Edwards. Jorge, welcome back to the show, man.
It has been a minute. Thank you for having me. Just if you hadn't checked it out, check out Dynasty 365 over on the Fantasy and Frames podcast, as well as over on the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel. Justin Taylor, man, like last year, you three guys, and as well as Stacey Perez and everybody else we brought on, just knocked it out of the park in year one with Fantasy and Frames. Justin Taylor, JT Orange on Twitter, is another guy who just is crushing it. Thank you. Definitely somebody you all should talk shop. I know he was with you and Mike Haas on One Foot Down, the College Fantasy Football podcast on Monday night. Just an amazing guy. I can't say enough about him. But yes, I'm thrilled to be back here with you all. It's great to talk shop. Great to talk some rankings. We're so close to the NFL draft, a week away, a week and a day away. And, it's funny. We could have the greatest debate tonight, and then a week and a day from now, all of it doesn't matter. And you got to love that about fantasy football, right?
Yeah, very true.
That's the joy of it, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. I'm gonna put the three amigos here. I'm gonna grab their rankings, find the biggest discrepancies, and find out why these guys have these players where they do have them. But before we do that, we're gonna talk some NFL. There was some big news across the NFL this week. Okay, maybe not as big as some other weeks, but there was some running back signing news. And one of the biggest names in free agency, Royce Freeman, has signed with the Dallas Cowboys. Guys, the room is wide open. What are we thinking about? Oh, J.K. Dobbins has signed with the Los Angeles Chargers. He rejoins Greg Roman, Gus Edwards, Jorge. We were all expecting the Chargers to draft a running back, and everyone was expecting Blake Corum. If they do draft a running back, are we just completely not touching this room at all?
No, because you don't know what you're getting out of J.K. Dobbins. We have to look. I haven't looked back and seen what the contract situation is. He's coming off of the Achilles injury. Yet he's good to go apparently, which is making you wonder how bad are Achilles injuries now? Anyhow, modern medicine, right? I wouldn't say that you're steering clear. But if one of these running backs post NFL draft lands in the, that we're all high on, lands with the Chargers, I think it's fair to assume that most of us think in the second round of rookie drafts, that's kind of where you're getting your value at the running back position. I don't know if the Chargers running back is somebody that I would necessarily prioritize in the second round of my rookie drafts if they go to LA. That being the case, it really does depend on what's going on. You never know, right? I really thought Gus Edwards was going to be the flying under the radar free agent signing there at the running back position so far this year. But this J.K. Dobbins thing with Greg Roman, like you said, reuniting from Baltimore, the last few seasons when they were both healthy, they were their skill sets were different, but in terms of end zone usage and end zone scoring, the red zone scoring, versus attempts, conversions, touchdowns, they were neck and neck. So it kind of sucks, right? Trying to figure out who you're going with. I personally, and I'm not being name biased here, I would probably roll with Edwards, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, if I had to pick one between the two. But as far as like getting your rookie running back, whoever lands with the Chargers, I'm probably not getting them in the second round.
Yeah, I think for me, more so, it just mattered. What I'm curious about is where they invest in the running backs. If they take him in the early day 2 in the second round and they invest in like a Trey Benson or a Jonathan Brooks, somebody early on, then I'm still fine taking a shot on the rookie at that point. But if they don't take a running back until day 3, then at that point, maybe I'm okay with taking shots on these guys in the later rounds. But it really just depends on the draft capital the running back gets that ends up landing there too. Because I do still think, like Gator said in the comments, I think they do still draft a running back, but it's just a question of when does it happen.
And Drew, you bring up an interesting point, and you mentioned Jonathan Brooks. So I'm just wondering, just off of us riffing right now, whether the J.K. Dobbins signing is a sort of green light that maybe they're considering Jonathan Brooks and taking a redshirt year on him and taking a flyer on a J.K. Dobbins. And ultimately, you look at it in 2025, and maybe they plan on Brooks being their guy alongside Gus Edwards. Complete speculation on my part. I have nothing to back that up, but it's just an interesting theory that could possibly happen.
Yeah, and that's a great way to look at it into the future. You might be getting one of these Los Angeles running backs that they do draft at a value because they might drop considering the people in front of them. And when you look at the people in front of them, J.K. Dobbins, like Jorge said, coming off the Achilles, already has the knee issues. Gus Edwards isn't a guy that's just a clean bill of health either. He's also coming off some devastating injuries with his knee. So there could be, you never want to predict injuries, but there could be a pathway to success for some of these running backs. And it could be a running back that Blake Corum or Jonathan Brooks that falls to the back end of the second or the early third of your drafts that you can get some value on. Other than that, there's not much news from around the NFL. Anything else we want to touch on before we hop into these rankings, fellas?
I'm still kind of looking at the Dallas thing and Royce Freeman being a non-factor. I still think Dallas has to draft a running back at this point. Yeah, they're just trying to have as many camp bodies as possible, and then you're kind of deciding who that second and third running back going to be between a Rico Dowdle, a Deuce Vaughn, and whoever they draft, because ultimately, and Royce Freeman, because at the end of the day, all these dudes that are currently in that room are 2s and 3s. So the running back thing is still very much in play. Though the Royce Freeman signing, that they made the deal out of it, was hilarious.
Royce Freeman still more efficient than Rachaad White was last year in certain metrics. Just wanted to throw that out there. Braylon Allen to the Cowboys.
Yeah. All right, before we head into the rankings dissection, let's head over to the chat and say hello, old-fashioned football. Thanks for tuning in. Gator J, our guy, always a pleasure. He's saying Dallas is going all in with the Royce Freeman stuff. I mean, if that's all in, then they must not have a lot of chips, man.
They're going to be out.
Chris, hold on. Before we go any further, I'm offended that we just kind of glossed over the old-fashioned football comment, because this may be the first positive shout out that I've gotten in a year from somebody. So shout out old-fashioned football. Those are my guys.
There you go. And then, wow, Rhett, Malik Davis.
No, could you forget?
Yeah, I made some Malik Davis tweets last year. They were mistakes. So we'll just leave it at that. Mistakes were made.
Mistakes were made. All right, let's get into our first player, quarterback. The consensus on Fantasy Pros has this guy at quarterback 2 right now. Between the 3 of you, one of you have him at quarterback 8, one of you at 5, and one of them at 3. So a QB1 across the board. But considering where the consensus has him, where Drew has him, and where Rhett has him, Jorge, you got Jalen Hurts as QB8. Yeah. Do you see, is it the main reason that is it the role of Saquon Barkley there taking away the rushing touchdowns from Jalen Hurts that's going to ultimately hurt his upside for you?
So initially that was going to be my argument. And I know Drew has him as in spoiler alert, has him as QB3. And so I went back from last year and I tried to look at some correlation between Jalen Hurts' usage as a runner versus the stretch of time where DeAndre Swift was actually like good.
Electric.
Yeah. Thank you. Electric. I shouldn't have said good. Electric. Thank you very much. That time period was weeks 2 through 8. So when I was looking at the different like rushing attempt totals, in week 2, Swift 28, Hurts 12 with two rushing touchdowns. Week 13, 16 to Hurts' 10 with a touchdown. 14 with Swift, 9 with Jalen Hurts. And you can go on the list, so on and so forth. A lot of 1-yard touchdowns, a lot of tush pushes. Here's my thing. For me, when you get into the top 12 of ranking anything, whether it's Dynasty, Redraft, Best Ball, whatever, it comes to a certain things. You have all these like elite quarterbacks or elite people at various positions. It's not so much of like where you see them per se. It's like, who are you putting above them or behind them? And how are you evaluating this? So, for example, my quarterback 3 for Dynasty is Patrick Mahomes, and I get it. He had a down year last year. He only had 5 top 10 weeks in fantasy in 2023. But let's not forget that, he had 13 top 10 weeks in 2022. The team was beat up. It was the defense that carried them last year. But let's not forget also that when he's on his game, when the weapons are there, he put up 333 yards and 2 touchdowns and won a Super Bowl against the San Francisco 49ers, one of the best defenses in all of the NFL. So I'm not thinking year to year. We're talking Dynasty. We're talking about Dynasty rankings. I'm thinking about 2 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years. I'm thinking about the long game, the long con here. And the fact of the matter is, when you look at the short-term situation, maybe for redraft, I will have Jalen Hurts higher than Patrick Mahomes, just because recency and just how good he has been. And he's been fantastic. I'm not trying to take anything away from Jalen Hurts, but you did bring in Saquon Barkley. You do have now Kellen Moore there, who has a strong commitment to the running game. And we saw last year Jalen Hurts kind of get beat up towards the end of the year, and they probably don't want their franchise quarterback getting beat up year after year after year and taking unnecessary risks. That is my only reason why I'm bumping him from 3 to 8 compared to Drew's rankings. Yeah.
I don't have any issues with the Patrick Mahomes ranking. I've got Mahomes at 2. So, I've got him in front of Hurts as well, even though me having Hurts at 3, I have Mahomes in front of him as well. I don't have any issue with that. Where the separator with Hurts for me is whenever I start seeing him getting ranked behind guys like Stroud, Dak, Joe Burrow, guys that because they don't have the rushing upside, they're going to have to flirt with 4,500 yards and 35, 40 touchdowns to get that top 2, top 3 fantasy season, just because of what rushing can do to lift your floor. And with the weapons that Stroud has at his disposal now, he's as good of a bet as anybody to do that. But it's just tough to bet on that consistently year over year in Dynasty whenever you have a guy that is going to give you over 130 attempts every year since he's been a starter on the ground, double-digit touchdown upside. I know Kelsey's retiring. I don't think the tush push is going to go away completely. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, Saquon's going to get some more goal line carries. You don't bring a guy like Saquon in and not give him some of those. But I don't, he's still going to be up there flirting with double-digit rushing touchdowns most likely. Like, it's just – it's what he's there to do. It's fair to be concerned about the efficiency numbers coming down as a passer last year a little bit. That he didn't play as well as a passer last year than he did 2 years ago. But whenever you have that rushing upside, and then you have, speaking of Dynasty, you have your core around you with Devontae Smith and AJ Brown all locked in until 2026. And then you just look at the last couple of years, he's been the quarterback 3 and the quarterback 2 the last 2 seasons. And so it's just, I can't, it's hard for me with him only being 25 years old. Is that right? With him only being 25 years old and already having 2 top 3 quarterback finishes under his belt, it's tough for me to rank too many more guys ahead of him other than Allen and Mahomes.
Yeah, and I've got him at 5, and it might be 4 after hearing the arguments, because I currently have Stroud above him with Mahomes, Allen, and Lamar 1, 2, and 3. And yeah, you mentioned the passing efficiency, and that's where my big concern is, because the perception has always been, man, he's not very accurate. Well, he was super not accurate last year. Against man coverage, he was 16th in completion percentage, and against zone, where you can pick guys apart, he was 24th amongst quarterbacks in zone completion percentage, and he was 7th in deep attempts, but only 22nd in deep completion percentage. He had 20 interceptable passes last year, and he has those great running metrics. He's super efficient. He has the touchdowns. But like you guys have already mentioned, do they come down a little bit with Saquon Barkley there this year? The way I'd like to look at Jalen Hurts is this. He's got all the rushing upside of a Lamar Jackson without the passing floor of a Lamar Jackson. And I think that's the big separator in the difference between them.
Thank you for saying that. First of all, like,
That's fair.
not enough shows are just giving open props to Lamar Jackson as a passing quarterback. So thank you very much for doing that, Rhett.
Oh, what I do.
Yeah, and a big part of it too is like when you look at his passing at the second half of last season is where he really struggled. First half of last season, he was consistently finishing as a QB1. Second half, he was finishing as a QB1, but he was propped up by those high rushing touchdown numbers. 5 of the last 7 games, he threw for 200 yards or less. So as you say that these quarterbacks that some people may have above them that don't have the rushing upside need to flirt with the 40 touchdowns and 4,000 passing yards for Jalen Hurts to sustain a top 3 QB finish. He needs to flirt with 12 to 15 rushing touchdowns. Am I wrong there?
No, you're not wrong. If the passing efficiency numbers don't come back, then you're not wrong at all.
Yeah. So the thing for me I'm big on Jalen Hurts. The thing for me is I gotta see what Saquon Barkley is going to be in that offense and how much they're going to implement that tush push with Saquon Barkley there. So Jalen Hurts, QB8 for Jorge, QB5 for Rhett, QB3 for Drew.
And I want to say that right there before, whenever you say that, I will tell you, I've got him in a tier with my quarterback 4 and quarterback 5, Lamar and CJ Stroud. So and I know on the website you can't see tiers, but I think that that's important perspective to have to where, like, yes, I have him at quarterback 3, but there is a group of quarterbacks in Lamar and Stroud that I think I would understand if you have those guys above them. So it's just a little more context that it's not just like a hard line, like you have to draft Jalen Hurts quarterback 3 and nobody else, no matter what. There's more to it than that.
So I have a question, if you don't mind. Dak Prescott compared to Jalen Hurts, like, are we more concerned? Do we have more confidence in Dak being able to compensate for the lack of rushing with more passing volume versus Hurts having more rushing attempts now that they have Saquon?
I wouldn't be able to bet on it personally, because of the lack of rushing upside since the last injury that he dealt with whenever he came back, and the rushing just wasn't there as much. I think this past year was his first year where he really was in that top tier of quarterbacks at the end of the season. What was it? I think it was the best finish of his career, if I remember right. I don't know if that's a trend that's going to be able to continue. It feels like that's something where I think he's probably more likely to take a step back before Jalen Hurts does, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with that.
Nice.
All right, there it is. That's Jalen Hurts. Next up on the docket, we got wide receiver Garrett Wilson from the New York Jets. All 3 of you guys have this guy ranked inside of your top 10 for wide receivers. Drew's got him as high as wide receiver 5. Rhett's got him at wide receiver 7, and Jorge's got him at wide receiver 9. I want to go around the frames here, talk about where you guys why you guys have him where you do. A wide receiver that's only had a 5 100-yard receiving games in his profile. So I'm guessing you're all expecting Garrett Wilson to get this instant bump from the quarterback play in Aaron Rodgers. So I want to hear who you guys have ahead of Garrett Wilson and who you guys have directly behind Garrett Wilson, and why you have Garrett Wilson ranked as high as you do. And we always got to start with the guest. So Jorge, man, the floor is yours.
Sure. So I will give you some players above and below where I have Garrett Wilson. So I have, like you said, I have him at 9. So at 6, I have Pittman, target volume, just targets. Efficiency be damned. Volume is king. Puka Nacua, AJ Brown, then Garrett Wilson, followed by at 10, Drake London, which you can make the argument of flipping those, DJ Moore and Devonta Smith. Look, anybody who says that Aaron Rodgers coming back to this offense isn't a huge reason why they're bumping Garrett Wilson in their rankings is lying. Like, let's call it. The dude is one of the, say what you will about him off the field and all the other crap he does there. On the field, he makes superstars out of young wide receivers. That goes without saying. I'm not scared away by the Mike Williams signing. I'm not scared away that a lot of teams have projected Brock Bowers as being the tight end pick there for the New York Jets. I'm not concerned at all, to be honest with you. I really think that it is the Aaron Rodgers bump. And let's not forget, look what he did last year with Zach Wilson. I mean, again, not crazy, super, awe-inspiring numbers, but at the end of the day, he was the de facto go-to number one guy for that offense. And I just feel like it just makes too much sense to have him there. And you bring up a very good point. And I think that's something that a lot of people have to take into consideration also when they're assessing value in Dynasty is we can drink the Kool-Aid all we want. But if the performance is not there and the upside is not there, well, then you're going off of efficiency. And then if efficiency is not there, well, then you're going off of volume. So the question is, do you trust the volume to be consistent from year to year? Do you trust the efficiency to be there? And more importantly, after that, do you trust the goddamn quarterback throwing them the ball? And I think all those things line up well for Garrett Wilson, which is why I have him ranked where I do.
All right.
Yeah. So for me, it's definitely just a bet on a young, talented receiver that's had to deal with all-time bad quarterback play to start his career. The Jets over the last 2 years are the only team in the league with the team passer rating lower than 75 each of those 2 years. You guys know how big of a Drake London fan that I've been, and I've talked about how bad his quarterback play has been until I've been blue in the face, and even London's quarterback play hasn't been that bad. And despite Garrett Wilson being the guy with the worst quarterback play between the two, he's been more productive than Drake London to start his career. And if the dude can put up 80 plus receptions and over 1,000 yards each of his first 2 seasons, despite that all-time bad quarterback play, I just feel like once you do put Rodgers back into this offense, the sky's the limit. And one of the things that's really been holding him back is the lack of touchdowns. And I would expect, they're tough to predict year to year, but I would expect that a guy seeing the amount of targets that he's seen, I can't remember what the numbers were. I know last year he was 4th, I believe, in targets. If he's seeing that kind of volume in a better offense with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, those touchdown numbers are likely to go up. I mean, he did it in college. I'm sure he could do it in the NFL as well. And so his yards per route run numbers, they weren't great last year, but fewer than 70% of his targets were deemed catchable, so that makes more sense. And he still had almost 43% of the team's air yards and almost 1,000 unrealized air yards. So I've got him in my tier 2 of receivers, right behind Amon-Ra, and then right in front of Puka and AJ Brown, and then that's where the tier cuts off. And then I've got Drake London right below that. So I've got him in a group with 4 other receivers. I think that there's a pretty clear tier break once you get past Jefferson, Chase, and Lamb, and then I think there's a few directions you can go. But I think that if he's not already that high for most people, I think by the time he puts on the field what he can do with a competent quarterback, I think he's going to start shooting up people's rankings.
Yeah, and those are valid points. But whenever I'm looking at the Garrett Wilson profile, I mean, you mentioned the top tier being obvious with CD, Jets, and Chase. Take your pick on who number 1 is. I honestly kind of think Amon-Ra is in that second tier by himself. I just think with the volume and everything and his usage in that offense, he's in his own place. Where we start to get interesting is in that third tier with AJ Brown, Puka Nacua, and then Garrett Wilson at my wide receiver 7. So what we have in a nutshell is you have 5 guys who are established alphas in their offense. You have Puka Nacua, who had this elite usage last year and is a year younger than Garrett Wilson. Add that in, plus the uncertainty, we are expecting an Aaron Rodgers bump. But at the end of the day, what is Aaron Rodgers still at 40 years old? What's the offense going to look like? How's his arm? How's Garrett Wilson going to be used? With all these things going on, I would kind of want to know exactly where Garrett Wilson stands with all of this before I made a hard and fast top 5 ranking. That being said, once we get into preseason and we start to see some data and some usage, this is one of those guys that can be wildly fluctuating for me. I can move him as high as wide receiver 5 above AJ Brown, or I can move him into wide receiver 11 right below Brandon Ayuk. That's kind of my range right now with Garrett Wilson.
You think the floor is Ayuk for this year?
I mean, Brandon Ayuk is one of these guys where, I've just always kind of had a thing for him. And I think he's getting ready to get into a place where he is either going to emerge as being the number 1 option in San Francisco this year, or he gets traded and he is a number 1 option elsewhere. So for me, I just think Brandon Ayuk is a very interesting guy that we don't have time to discuss right now. But watch the draft day till he leaves. If he happens to get moved, and last week we had all the Twitter stuff, the Instagram stuff. Who really cares? It's all smoke screens at this point in the season. But Ayuk's an interesting guy, but we're talking Garrett right now, and he's firmly somewhere between that 5 and 11 right now. So 7 feels right.
All right. Now, if Garrett Wilson doesn't elevate, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come in and elevate Garrett Wilson, because when you look at the win numbers versus the coverages that Wilson sees, it's not the greatest. Versus man, versus zone, the reception percentage, the yards per route run doesn't look great on paper for Garrett Wilson, but some of that does have to do with the competency of his quarterback. So if Aaron Rodgers comes in, doesn't elevate Garrett Wilson to get him to possibly be a top 10, I will say top 12 dynasty wide receiver this season, is he a wide receiver 2 in dynasty from here on out in your rankings? Jorge? Like how much leeway are you going to give him before you just start dropping him back?
You're right. And when we're talking dynasty, as opposed to redraft, we're not talking about just 1 year sample size. We're talking about multiple year sample sizes and what we're thinking the range of outcomes could be going forward for at least 2 to 3 years or 3 to 5, depending on your league. It's very easy to say, well, he's had crap quarterbacks and look how good he's been considering the situation. That narrative only lasts for so long. You know what I mean? At a certain point, is it the situation where he drops from being a high-end 2 to a low-end 2, but a high-end 3? Will the Jets quarterback situation, is that set up for the long term? Is Aaron Rodgers really a 3-year patch there for the Jets? Or is he a one-and-done guy? We don't know. We really don't know. But I feel like this is the barometer year, right? If he plays, if he's healthy, referring to Aaron Rodgers, this is going to tell us where we're setting up Garrett Wilson for years to come. So in certain respects, this may be the highest he'll ever be dynasty-wise in terms of value, because we're buying the drinking the Kool-Aid, we're eating the dip or buying the dip, whatever the expression's called, based off of potential. But yeah, I see where you're going with this question. I do say that this is the year, and if we're not seeing it, then he starts to drop.
Yeah, because sometimes in dynasty we can get caught ranking the talent over what the actual output is, right? So we always got to reflect on, Garrett Wilson hasn't consistently finished as a wide receiver 2, back end wide receiver 2, in total points, that is, so not points per game, but at the end of the day, we always got to look to adjust the rankings. The next guy, Fourth and Frame's darling. I was a little surprised when I was building the show up, and I seen both my guys here, Rhett and Drew.
It hurt.
Have them so low. I can only guess it had to do with the influx of a certain Buffalo Bills wide receiver, but nonetheless, our guy Jorge Edwards did his best bone crusher impression when he was making his rankings, and he was never scared, baby. He was never scared of no Stephon Diggs. So Jorge,
yes, sir,
just frames yours. You can gush all you want about Nico Collins, man. We are here for it.
Look, whether it's yards after the catch per reception, yards per route run, elusiveness, quarterback rating when targeted, this guy checks all the boxes. He's in the top 5 of all of these efficiency metrics, and we saw the production. People will like to draw attention to the fact that, well, when Tank Dell was healthy, it was Tank Dell that was doing super well. But how much better was he than Nico? He may not have been the wide receiver 1 in a wide receiver 1 category for a week, but he was probably high end wide receiver 2, flirting with that wide receiver 1 barrier there. Here's the thing. I'm more concerned with that being the case. I just said that name with Tank Dell. I'm more concerned with Tank Dell taking a massive jump despite coming off of the broken leg. You'd never say 5 years ago, thank God for modern medicine. I'm more concerned with Tank Dell than I am with Stephon Diggs. Because you want to talk efficiency metrics and falling through the tank, goddamn, like Stephon Diggs took a huge drop in efficiency and missed tackles forced in yards after the catch per reception. And we saw it towards the end of last year. Like it got so, think about this, folks. It got so bad that the Buffalo Bills decided, hey, let's throw to somebody else. Let's make Khalil Shakir a star. Let's put his name on the bat. Like there's something there. And like, this hurts me as a Maryland Terrapin. You know, I'll always be happy with Stephon Diggs and he'll always be my guy. But you have to think about this from the Texans' perspective. They voided out the rest of his contract. He'll be a free agent after this year. He'll be another year older. Now, the same thing could be said for Nico Collins. He's, going to be up after this year. But I feel like if there was one wide receiver that they would bring back, it'd be Nico. And the fact that the efficiency is there, and you've seen that efficiency the past couple seasons and definitely taken a stride upward last year. I'm not going to lie. Having CJ Stroud as your quarterback works wonders for a wide receiver, but that's just a situation. And therefore you can't really change that much barring injury, which knock on wood, that never happens. It just makes too much sense that they extend him in terms of a contract. It makes too much sense that you look at the productivity, the elusiveness, just everything Nico Collins does is just fucking fantastic with CJ Stroud in this offense. I don't think the Texans want to mess that up. I'm not worried about Stephon Diggs. I'm not going to go say that he's washed, but he was playing like he was washed last year. So from an efficiency metric standpoint, so and not to mention Nico, I think you had Derek Brown on a few weeks ago, which that was an awesome show, which if you haven't watched already, go back on our YouTube channel, like, subscribe, and check out that episode. He brought up the point very clearly. Like, Nico Collins can go in the slot. Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs can play outside. You can get these three wide receivers playing great. Nico Collins led all of Texans wide receivers last year in the slot. So he's super efficient. He can do everything all over the field, line up wherever you want him to be. I'm not concerned. He was wide receiver 12 for me a couple of days ago. I bumped him down to 14. I'm not seeing the huge drop. And I get from a redraft perspective why I might be concerned, but for Dynasty, for the long term, I'm not concerned about Nico.
I am a little bit more concerned, not about Nico the player, but I mean, I know to us on the outside looking in, it makes all the sense in the world for the Houston Texans to re-sign Nico. But the reality is, there's a lot of things that make all the sense in the world to us that NFL teams end up not agreeing with, and it's just really, really tough to speculate that for me. So, bringing in Stephon Diggs in, that does worry me a little bit. I do believe he is still an extremely talented receiver that's going to make an impact on that offense. I think it's just going to be a pick your poison type of thing, where it's going to be Diggs one week, it's going to be Tank one week, it's going to be Nico one week. It'll be two of them, for a few weeks, because Stroud's going to have big games because that's what the guy does. And so there will be weeks where you'll be happy you started two of the guys, but it's going to be that already feels like it's going to be a nightmare to try to figure out from week to week during the season. All of which will be great for Stroud, but like just looking at the guys I have in front of Nico. You got Zay Flowers, who's going to be tied to Lamar for the near future. Devontae Smith tied to that Philly offense for the near future. DK Metcalf, the number one option in his offense, at least based on what we've seen. We'll see what happens with JSN this year. But Waddle, a top two option in his offense. Michael Pittman, the wide receiver one in his offense. T. Higgins, DJ Moore. Like I just, it's tough feeling better long term about Nico's situation compared to those guys with the contract thing hanging up in the balance. Now, if news comes out tomorrow that he signed a 4 or 5 year contract with Houston, then I would bump him up. But that is my main concern. Jorge, you're not wrong.
Yeah, 100% on the contract stuff. But what concerns me and why I have him so low, because we talk about the future and the near future and all this stuff in Dynasty. Well, right now the future for Dynasty is this coming season. That's part of the Dynasty formula as well. And I'm just so concerned right now with Houston being all in. I just feel like there might be too many options that could eat into Nico Collins's ridiculous 27.3% target share last year. Stephon Diggs ain't coming in to be a donkey. Joe Mixon has always been a solid pass catcher. Tank Dell is one of these guys that has just been good all over the place. And the thing with Nico Collins, you mentioned efficiency, and yes, he was super efficient. I'm worried about sustainability because some of these things are just too good to be true. The fact that he had 80 catches on only 109 targets, like a 73.3% catch rate, is not sustainable for anybody. Neither is a 10% touchdown rate with those 8 touchdowns. Neither is that 3.24 yards per route run. Like, these are all things that just jump off the page and say, man, I don't think he can do that again. But the scariest stat for me about Nico Collins is this. His win rate last year when he was running routes was 40.4%, and that was 96th amongst wide receivers in the league. Like, that is a scary stat for me to look at, which tells me he may very much be a contested catch guy. So I love the player. I was banging the drum hard last year because of how low he was. Now he's kind of taken a bit of a run up the boards, and I'm going to say there's a potentially decreased role and that crazy efficiency. I mean, for me this season and beyond, he just feels like a guy that might just be primed for a regression this season.
So as I knock my microphone away from the screen, I don't disagree with you all for this year, but I feel like that's a redraft assessment, but then again, I guess it depends on your perspective. Are you in win now mode for your dynasty team, or are you playing the long road? If you're not in win now mode, are you valuing Nico higher than you would if you were in win now mode? You know what I'm saying?
Personally, in all my dynasty leagues right now, I am in win now mode because that's just who I am. I'm always just trying to go for it no matter what. So yeah, hey, that's who I am.
I mean, for me, it's just last year for him to have the fantasy season he did. He wound up being a top 2 option in an offense tied to an elite quarterback. I mean, nobody, even those of us that love Stroud, I don't think any of us expected him to come out and be what he was last year. And it's just what are the chances that he hits free agency? Like, we hope Houston resigns him, but if he doesn't get resigned, what are the chances he hits free agency and winds up as a top 2 option tied to an elite quarterback? Because there's not very many of those to go around in the first place. And then a lot of these elite quarterbacks already have elite pass catching weapons around them too. It's just, it feels like it's going to be really tough for him to find himself in a situation as good as or better than the one he was in last year at moving forward. So it's tough to take that plunge. And if there's anybody I want to, it's Nico. I love Nico's game, but I just, it's so hard to, the unknown of what's going to come after this season is so tough for me.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it, the unknown with that offense and the team as a whole and what they're going to look like going into week 1 and the amount of mouths that they have to feed on that offense. So I totally understand both sides of the rankings. So let's jump into the next player. We have 2 more guys to get through. We appreciate everyone hopping in on the stream. We got Jorge Edwards, the head honcho over here at Fantasy and Frames, joining the show to dissect our dynasty rankings. Our next player is a guy that I'm hoping really takes a step in his 4th year. He's already got a season where he's finished as a QB1. His rookie season was rough, but last season was another decent season with a good amount of rushing totals. See Rhett's face already. You all pretty much got him ranked around the same spot. 10 being the highest, 13 being the lowest. So ultimately, I want to find what the outcome is going to be of Trevor Lawrence this year with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Jorge, you got him as the lowest on this group. Do you have him at his ceiling? Do you see QB 13 the ultimate high spot for Trevor Lawrence this year?
I see him. No, I do not see him as his ultimate high spot. That's obviously where I see him now. I like to look at this situation, and again, you said it just a few minutes ago. Like the 3 of us, Rhett, Drew, and myself, we're not that far apart here. So we're really pulling hairs as far as where his dynasty value is. For me, I think you have to look at the level of competition inside of the division and whether or not that has escalated to the point that could actually cause him to kind of like have a situation where he would have to play in more either 1 lopsided games or 2 more competitive games that would require him to either throw the ball more or to add to his rushing upside that he showed last year. Contrary to popular opinion, and I say this now and watch this come December, this blow up in my face. I do not think Gabe Davis in Jacksonville is going to be as boomer bust as he was in Buffalo. I think Buffalo, you knew what the recipe was. It was Diggs, Josh Allen finding X random receiver for a huge touchdown bomb, or Josh Allen running the ball. There you go. I think there's going to be a little bit more balance, more nuance to this Jaguars offense with Doug Peterson there, and they'll try to find out a way to get more consistent usage out of Gabe Davis. I know. A lot of us had Gabe Davis on their dynasty teams, put up a bunch of donuts for them last year. It's a sore subject. I get it. I do feel like, though, that they did a good job of upgrading that wide receiver 2 position, although my Parker Washington shares I am not liking so much right now. But at the same time, so going back to where I was talking about as far as the level of competition within the division, I don't think the level of competition within the division has gotten so high that you're going to have to worry about these lopsided games where garbage touchdowns are going to be a thing or garbage yardage are going to be a thing. Again, QB 13, we're talking about QB 10, QB 12. We're hoping for the upside. You mentioned it, Urban Meyer year, the year that we all want to forget. For me, there's a lot of other factors to come into play. You know, how good is that defense going to be? You know, compared to what they were a year ago, can they actually keep them in games? If not, or you know, it's not so much a situation like a Jalen Hurts or a Patrick Mahomes, or insert other top 12 quarterback, where it's like, I don't care what the situation is. This is a player that I'm taking in my drafts and I'm feeling comfortable with. Like, if I'm going to start up, Trevor Lawrence is like, okay, I am trusting the upside. Period.
Yep. I dig it. Rhett, when I brought him up, I saw the reaction on your face. I heard what Jorge had to say about Trevor Lawrence. So I got to get your reaction on the player, because you had like this just tasted a dirty sock look on your face. And it was not good, man.
I'm gonna lead with this. Trevor Lawrence, for all the pomp and circumstance for what he is and what he could be in his career, has a 3.3% career touchdown rate. Trevor Lawrence last year was 8th in attempts and 5th in deep ball attempts. He also was 4th in the league in danger plays and 4th in interceptable passes in the league. He has to have a breakout year. This is the make or break Trevor Lawrence year. This is where we figure out if he is a dynasty asset or whether he is a guy that is just another dude that's going to be a solid fantasy football quarterback. Now, all this to say, Trevor Lawrence is a dude that in a league that plays in increasing amounts of zone coverage, completed 70.7% of passes against zone coverage last year. Trevor Lawrence, I really want to be down on him. But when I'm looking at the landscape right now, I mean, he's my quarterback 12 because, like, can you name 15 guys above him? No, he's one of the top 12. He's one of the top 12 dynasty guys right now. So as out as I have been, depending on where he's going at value, and right now I believe it's somewhere around pick 58 in one quarterback leagues, or maybe and in Superflex, he's probably a late second round sort of guy. You can talk me into anybody at value, and as much as I would have to pinch my nose, that could be Trevor Lawrence. That could even be Gabe Davis. Breaking news: Trevor Lawrence sucks. That's yes.
Now we know why Rhett hates Trevor Lawrence. That's good. That's good to get that out of the way.
That just hates him, despises him, apparently.
I don't know. For me, it's the small glimpses of greatness that we've seen. Like, he had the pedigree coming in that I think carried him for a little while, but then he also has had just these small glimpses of huge upside where he, like, his sophomore year. And I should say this to preface this, because I feel like I need to get this out there with Trevor Lawrence. His rookie season did not happen to me in my brain. Like, that is just completely like that. Urban Meyer
just
that
like Jaden Daniels at ASU.
Didn't happen.
Yeah, remember that.
Little Men in Black thing went over my eyes. That
neuralizer.
That never happened, because that might have been the worst head coaching I've seen in my lifetime. But after that, he was quarterback 8 then the very next year, and he had a stretch for like 5 of his last 7 games to end the season. He was a top 10 quarterback. And then last year, what was it? He had 3 straight weeks from week 11 to week 13 where he was a top 6 quarterback, and a couple other quarterback ones mixed in there. Ended up coming in as quarterback 13. I've got him at quarterback 10. I don't have rookies in yet. I'm pretty confident in saying that Caleb Williams, if he goes number 1 like we assume, he'll probably be ahead of him. Jaden Daniels, we'll see what happens with his rushing upside. I might put him in that area, but I do think this is the year we find out, like, does Trevor Lawrence elevate himself to that Herbert Burrow tier, or is he down in like the Tua, Brock Purdy, that area? I think this is the year we figure that out. I've got him kind of right in between those 2 tiers right now with Jordan Love and Dak, and so I think there's arguments to be made where you could see him go either direction after this season. But it's just the touchdown rate, that being with as many attempts as he's had and as talented of a quarterback as he is, that number just feels like it's just destined to have a big touchdown year eventually. And Travis Etienne did have double-digit rushing touchdowns last year. It's not crazy to think a couple of those go to passing touchdowns. And I think it was Ian Hardis, maybe, I can't remember who it was, put out a pretty decent-sized Twitter video of just barely miss it moments last season between Lawrence and Ridley and a couple other guys, where like he was just like literally inches from so many big plays last year. So it's just, you got to think stuff is going to start breaking a guy's way eventually. And so it feels like a guy that could be in for a big year. But I do agree with Rhett that this is probably the make or break year for Lawrence at this point.
And Drew, you're perfectly right in saying that if I'm saying that Nico Collins should come down and regress based off of how good he was last year, I have to say the same thing and say that, there's a chance that Trevor Lawrence can come up from where he was and have a better year in terms of touchdown rates and hit that 30 touchdown threshold that would make him elite. Like, I'm with that completely.
And he's not a crazy runner, but he does use his legs though. And he's got good size. He can get into the end zone on the ground as well. So he has the ability to get 5, 6, 7, 8 rushing touchdowns as well.
He's got 11 for his career, so that's not bad.
Yeah.
Yep. And the rushing volume's there. He's got, I believe, 2 seasons where he's hit that 70 rush attempts. Last season, 70. Season before that, 68. So he's hit 4,000 passing yards. Like all 3 of you guys said, he's just got to get that touchdown number up. If he can hit that 30 touchdowns with the rushing attempts, he's had 20 more rushing attempts than Jordan Love, just under 100 less passing yards. It's all going to come down to those touchdowns, man. And that's ultimately what's going to decide his future. They got to give him some help, though. I mean, Christian Kirk's there. Christian Kirk's, good. I'm not going to say great. He's a good wide receiver. Brought in Gabe Davis, got rid of Calvin Ridley. Tight end situation, Evan Ingram's there is not necessarily the greatest. I'm hoping that they address that in this draft.
Yeah, it would be nice to see them get one of those back end wide receivers, like the back end of the first round, grab like an AD Mitchell or somebody in that range. But I think come December, I think Gabe Davis is going to be exactly who we thought he was, unfortunately. So they probably need to do something.
You know what? I don't like the lack of mention of Parker Washington at all. Amongst
I do like Parker Washington. He just seems to the Jaguars seem to keep doing everything they can to bury him. So
bury him, yeah. Well, I'm selfishly saying that because in a dynasty league, the 3 of us are in. I have Parker Washington, so yeah.
And he really became a thing when Christian Kirk went down, though, right?
On Monday Night Football, yeah.
So he's like, it's going to be tough, but we got one more guy to get through. We got a special guest to bring in. Jorge brought in a ringer for this guy. Oh.
Hey, Jorge.
How you doing?
Hey, Jorge. Thank you for joining me.
There we go.
There
we go. We got the full room. JT, welcome to Fortune Frames, man. How's it going? You were just on Dynasty 365 with Jorge. You're all greased. You're ready to go. The engine's running. We left you idle a little bit in the back because we didn't want you to get, too loose to talk to these guys about Rachaad White, because that's the next guy we're talking about. Rhett and Drew got him at a good spot. Jorge's not as hot on him. He brought you in to talk shop with us. But before we do that, man, how's everything?
It's great. Jorge just brought me on because I'm going to back up all his points, and he just he just wants some help here. That's what.
Wow.
Whoa, hey, whoa. Shh. Let's not talk about the Venmo yet. Okay.
Hold on. Tonight,
Hometown
players, we're gonna have
cooking, that's
ourselves
crazy.
a tag team match.
Yeah, we do.
I love
And
pro wrestling.
yeah. Before we get into it, you guys are pretty separated. I mean, Jorge is and Rhett and Drew are pretty equal. Rhett's got him. I don't know if from the updated rankings, but Rhett's got him at RB14. Drew at RB12. I want to give you guys the floor first. And then I want Jorge and JT to tag in and tell us why you guys are completely wrong. So, Rhett and Drew, I mean, the frames are yours, boys.
I know Rhett's got the deep dive, so I'll just give you the very quick cliff notes. Right now with the running back landscape, there's not too many running backs that are 25 years old and have a top 4 season under their belt in terms of PPR. There's not too many guys that have done that and also have the lack of competition in the backfield currently, just as depth charts are set before the NFL draft, what we going off, what we know now. There's not too many guys that young with that type of fantasy season already under their belt. Now, it's very fair to project that the Bucs might draft a running back, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I can predict the future. So until I see it, I'm not going to assume that that's going to happen. So, Rhett, I'll let you let them know why you're high. You're right there with me on where you've got him.
Yeah, I was actually higher on him when he started the offseason. He's come down to running back 14. And I do expect Tampa to draft a running back. But again, I'm not a prognosticator. I'm not a Swami. I can't predict the future. So we're going to go with what we know. And the fact is that no matter what happens, Rachaad White is still going to have a strong role in this offense. And that's because of the pass game efficiency. I mean, how many backs that you know out here in the league putting up 64 catches, 549 yards receiving, 8.6 yards per catch, 383 routes run last season. Clearly, when it comes to Tampa Bay's offense, there is trust in Rachaad White to do his thing in the passing game. Now, before y'all go, well, what about rushing efficiency? Don't worry. That 3.6 yards per carry does alarm me. But, and I'm even going to say this, the man is not going to hit 330 touches again this season. But there is something to like here, and that is the fact that he had 66 evaded tackles last season, which was second in the league, and a 19.6% juke rate. This is still, in the worst case scenario, a very, very, very strong 60 to 80 catch third down running back. And you know who had some really damn good seasons doing that exact thing?
Don't you take my guy.
Listen, he signed with you guys this offseason.
No, that's not who I was going with, but close.
No,
okay,
but Austin Eckler cooked in fantasy football, doing the exact same thing that Rachaad White can do this season. So you can say what you want to, but if they draft a guy post-draft and he starts slipping, Rachaad White is a dude that I am slam dunk buying in Dynasty, no questions asked.
All right, fair points. A lot of good stuff, a lot of promising stuff. They did point the flaws in Rachaad White, but as a Dynasty running back, Jorge, you got him pretty low, and we need to hear why you do.
He sucks, man. Like, look, he sucks. He sucks as a running back. As a running back, RB 51 in yards after contact, RB 51 in breakaway runs, RB 44 in elusive rating. You know how bad you got to be the 44th running back in elusive rating? Pretty bad. And I get what you're saying, Rhett. And I get what Rhett and Drew are saying. None of us are good at predicting the future and whether or not the Bucs are going to be. I'll say that I am, and the Bucs are going to get a goddamn running back who can actually run the ball in the draft. I know, right?
We're at in the draft.
I have no idea. That's a great question.
Sixth round.
Come on. I need you're sticking your neck out.
Round five. Round five sounds like a good round.
That doesn't even matter. It's irrelevant at that point.
We're not worried. We're not concerned then.
You know who I have more faith in as an actual running back, and Drew, you'll love this. Your boy Sean Tucker. That's who I have more faith in. As a running back.
Sean Tucker.
Okay, but did let me ask you, did the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have more faith in Sean Tucker?
No, they did not last year.
I think they will this year.
It does not matter. It does not matter if we do.
Here's the thing, folks. You are hoping for the anomaly to happen again, which hasn't happened since 2017 and 2018. You are hoping that Rachaad White becomes Melvin Gordon 2.0. Because if you look at their efficiency stats and you look at their production stats, mirror images of one another. I would rather, for a dynasty perspective, where I'm investing long-term value on my roster, put that into somebody who is more efficient with all the efficiency metrics. Somebody has shown a rationale and objective reason for why you should be invested in. I would rather put more investment into Tajay Spears, who was a rookie who barely got any run last year, but showed the efficiency and now is going to have an opportunity to show the capability for the long term, than investing in a Rachaad White, where the guy, I know we like to talk about fantasy, and I know we're talking about fantasy. This is a fantasy football show.
Yeah.
And I know we like to talk about numbers
talking about
and analytics, but at the same time, like, the guy sucks. Like, if you're the NFL teams don't care about his fantasy.
So you feel good about investing in Tajay Spears. Nothing says confidence in the running back you already got rostered like being one of the biggest spenders at the running back position in free agency. Like, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers didn't bring in a Tony Pollard. So listen to what the teams are telling you.
We'll find out what the teams are telling us next week, though.
I agree, and I will be singing a completely different tune if they, similar to what I said with the Chargers, if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers use a day 2 pick to grab a Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks, Braylon Allen, one of those guys, then I will be singing a different tune as well. But we don't know that right now. With what we have
into the day,
the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had just as much chance as anybody to go get a Tony Pollard or Saquon or somebody, and they stayed pat. They didn't go get anybody, and last year they didn't have anybody else either, and they just kept giving Rachaad White the ball. So until with their roster moves they show me they're going to do otherwise, I'm just going to continue to believe they're going to efficiency be damned. They're going to keep giving this guy the rock and letting him do what he does best and catch passes.
And Jorge brings up the idea, he can be Melvin Gordon. I just gave you the keys to the kingdom. I'm telling you, I'm don't even disagree with you that Rachaad White is inefficient as a runner. Like, we're in lockstep on that. But the bottom line is, when he was the second running back in Tampa his rookie year, he had 50 catches. Then last season, when he was the lead dog, he had 64 catches. So all I'm saying is this: most nerds like us are playing in a half or full PPR format. Like, this standard scoring BS is out the door. It's dead to me.
Don't you hate standard scoring non-PPR? Come on.
It's gonna be what it's gonna be, and I'm just gonna say this: most people are playing.
It's just like having dial up.
Wow.
All right. We heard from Rhett and Drew. We heard from Jorge. We gotta hear from Justin and his take on Rachaad White, because that's why he's here. Drop the hate, Justin.
So here's the thing for me. Here's the thing is, I just think Rachaad White hit the all-time gold mine last year. I just think he hit the highest score he's ever going to score. I don't think he ever comes close to that again in fantasy. It just was like the perfect storm of injuries. They didn't really have anybody else. Baker Mayfield was just dumping the ball off to him constantly. I just don't see that happening next year. I think Rachaad White is way more the guy from his rookie year than he was the guy last year. To me, he's a 500-yard running back with 40 or 50 catches for like 300 yards. I just think that's more of who he actually is. I think the 64 catches for over 500 yards, the 900 yards rushing, I just don't think he ever comes close to those numbers again. I really don't. It would have to be another perfect storm. I've got him way down as a low end RB2. I mean, right now he's at like 20 for me. I mean, I'm not taking him anywhere unless he just absolutely falls out of the sky. But even then, I'm not really taking him. And mostly people want him. I'd rather have Jalen Warren. Personally, I know it's crazy to say he's a backup, but I just don't. I just think they're going to go running back. I think they're going to take somebody in the third round. I think their guys are looking at the stats like, hey, we had to do what we did with Rachaad White last year, but he's not our guy for the future if we're going to continue to get better. I just don't see it. Jorge ran off all the metrics. He's just not that good of a running back. He just lucked into constant touches last year because of just the situation that Tampa Bay was in. I just think there is no way he touches top 5 ever again in fantasy. I don't think he finishes RB1 again. I really don't. So I wouldn't. He's not on a non-draft list. I just am taking him lower than other people.
Yeah,
I think he's more in the RB2. I know I'm another one of those crazies. I actually like Sean Tucker more. I think Sean Tucker's going to have more of a real. I think Sean Tucker's going to get a real shot this year. With all the things that happened last year, it was just kind of a mess. I think he's going to get a real shot in training camp this year to be that guy. White he's a volume guy, and if he doesn't get the volume, he's cooked. So again, you're preying on that he just gets that. Oh, we don't have anybody else to give the ball to. Let's keep giving it to him. A team that thinks they got a shot at winning the division again and is trying to improve. I think they're just going to look for more efficient players, like Jorge said.
Yeah, I will say this:
they already had Sean Tucker in the building, and I know he had the health concerns pre-draft. I was a really big Sean Tucker fan, but I mean, he was healthy coming into the season last year, and the team showed you what they thought. Maybe there's not a world where he just can't improve and gain a bigger role, but I just don't think it would be enough to really make a huge difference in Rachaad White. Like if Rachaad White survives the NFL draft, I agree with you. I don't think he ends up being a top 4, top 5 running back again. I don't think that there's a world where he's hit his ceiling as a pass catcher, because I mean, that's what he got the day 2 NFL draft capital for in the first place. He was an elite pass catching running back coming out of college. So I don't think that, and Baker's back long-term with Tampa, and his tendencies as a quarterback is chuck it deep or dump it off. That's why Chris Godwin suffered so much last year. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that his pass catching work has hit his ceiling, but I do agree as a rusher, if they bring in somebody of significance in the NFL draft, I don't think he sees the volume in that aspect, but I don't think his value craters just because of what he is as a running back, where his best skills are, and then the quarterback he's paired with, he's always going to have a role in that aspect. But I agree that top 4, top 5 is probably not going to be a realistic outcome next year either.
And I'll say, go ahead.
Yeah, that's where I am on all this, and here's where I am on Tampa in general. They can draft any running back they want. If they have a 67.4% run block win rate, which was last in the league again this year, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter who they draft.
That's true. It's a good point.
Fair. And new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohn, spent time at University of Kentucky, Los Angeles Rams. Drew knows him really well, has had tendencies to lean on one guy. We saw Chris Rodriguez in 2021, Cam Akers on the Rams in 2022. Last year, we saw Ray Davis get leaned on in Kentucky in 2023. Ray Davis also was a big factor in the passing game too. So
Chris, Ray Davis that's my spot. I love Ray Davis. Everybody that's listening to any of our shows, I'm higher on Ray Davis than anyone. I think Ray Davis would be great in Tampa. I think if they took Ray Davis in like the 4th round, I'm smashing that. I'm taking him all over the place. I love that landing spot for him. I think they know what he can do. I just think he's more dynamic of a runner than White. I don't think White
he's a better runner
is out of it, but I think he's way more dynamic. And then I also, part of the reason I think he's going to lose some catches, I like Cade Otton this year. I think Cade Otton is going to get much more of some of those dump offs. I think he's going to be much more involved in the short passing game. And that's why I think, and that's what hurts, because if you're a Rachaad White guy, the catches matter. It's the same thing that happened to Najee Harris. When he had 74 as a rookie, everybody's like freaking Najee to the moon. The second he's catching 35 or 40, everybody's like, ugh, I don't like Najee anymore. So that's the thing. If his catches come back down to 45 or 50 and he doesn't get the rushing yards, man, that really craters his fantasy production where he's going to finish. And that's my worry, is you're going to get a little more Cade Otton in there. You're going to get another running back to take some of those carries away. And then if he's closer to 600 yards rushing and he's closer to 45 or 50 catches, now you're going to see him now he drops way down to that low end RB2 range. And that's my concern, is that is what happens.
Yeah, I'm not as big of a Cade Otton guy, but I do agree, if the pass catcher numbers take a hit at that point, you gotta ring the alarm, as we would say during the season.
So, Rhett, let me ask you a question.
Sure, let's go.
Okay, and I want to approach it from two perspectives, because here we are, we're giving fantasy advice, and thank you to all 140 of you who've been tuning in for this show so far consistently throughout the past hour. Obviously, as fantasy people, we like to give people objective advice from different perspectives. So, for Dynasty, we're talking about the person who's trying to acquire versus the person that's trying to sell. If you're trying to acquire Rachaad White, are you giving up RB1 draft capital to get him?
Am I giving up RB1 draft capital this year?
Yes.
So that's a second round pick, because that's probably where running backs are going in drafts this year.
Are you giving up a high second round pick for Rachaad White?
I think if there's a running back that gets drafted day 2 to one of the lucrative, to Dallas or the Chargers or something like that, they're going to be a first round pick in rookie drafts.
And I agree with that.
It's going to be like the 119, 110. Somebody's going to start creeping up to the back of the first round once the NFL draft happens.
So when you say a high second round, Mike, does that mean 2-1? Does that mean 2-4?
Yeah, sure.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, let's talk. Let's say 2-1 to 2-2. 2-1, 2-2.
2-1, 2-2. I mean, it's close. Probably more 2-4 to 2. Anything after 2-4, I'm comfortable. Now, anything after 2-3, I'm comfortable.
Now, as somebody who's trying to maybe acquire picks and you're selling Rachaad White, what is the least amount you would take? Obviously, you take a first round if someone's willing to give it to you, right? But what's your barometer for what you would accept?
What I would accept, probably, like we said, probably around that same place.
You go for the value. You go for the value there, Chris, with 2.8.
Yeah, I mean.
So would you take 2.8?
Would I take 2.8 for Rachaad White? I mean, that's right on the borderline. So probably somewhere in that neighborhood. So mid to late second is probably, or middle late second is probably where I start to have my cutoff.
Pre-draft, not knowing landing spots, draft capital, I'd probably have it around the 2-2. I've got a tier break after 14 overall. Jonathan Brooks, Trey Brinson come off the board for me right before that. And then it's just a big tier guy. So from 15 overall to 26 overall. So there's a lot of unanswered questions there. So if not knowing what's going to happen before the NFL draft, I'd probably need to have at least the 2-2 to want to sell him.
I mean, let's be honest. Who thought we were going to have this saucy of a Rachaad White conversation tonight? Let's go.
And then the NFL
featured on the thumbnail, baby.
Love it.
All right. That's it. That's the show. We've talked Jalen Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, Nico Collins, Rachaad White. There was another wide receiver in there, wasn't there?
Garrett Wilson,
the forgettable Garrett Wilson. Joined by special guest Jorge Edwards, who brought in his ringer, his tag team partner, the beast from the East, West. This guy's been all over the map. Justin Taylor, JT Brew. Jorge, let the people know where they can find you. The frame is yours. What you got going on inside of fantasy football, outside of fantasy football. The frame is yours, man.
First of all, I just want to give a shout out to you three. Being somebody who's had fantasy and frames going for the past 7 years, last year I took a step back from content creating as a whole And without any reservation whatsoever, after meeting you guys and working with you guys for not even a month, like literally 3 weeks, I thought to myself, Chris, Rhett, and Drew, you guys are going to be it. You guys are it. There's a reason why you're on this show. This is the longest running podcast we've had on the Fantasy and Frames Network since 2017. Like, I'm just so proud of you, and it shows. Like you've been on, the various satellite radio shows. You've interviewed the top guests in the industry. You've been interviewed as top guests in the industry. I am so impressed and so proud and honored that you guys are here, part of the Fantasy and Frames family. And I'm always going to be listening to you all. You all do tremendous work. So thank you for having me back on the show just to talk shop with you. To answer your question, though, you can find me at Jorge B. Edwards on Twitter. But I'd rather you just follow all of us at Fantasy and Frames, at Fantasy and Frames. You can catch us out on our, like I said, Twitter or X or TikTok. We really would appreciate if you head over to our YouTube channel, like and subscribe, hit the notification bell when you're so you can be notified when we put out fantasy football content. Or every social media channel, just follow us there. We're always there to give you great advice because that's what we care about. We can have our debates, we can have our discussions, we can have our disagreements. But at the end of the day, our job is to make sure that fantasy football is fun for you and that you get something out of it, and we help you have fun and have success in doing it. So as far as outside of the world of fantasy football, I'm a big pro wrestling geek. I have all my 1990 action figures right there on my shelf as I speak over my finger. Started a podcast recently with Keith Fleming called Inside the Squared Circle, which you can find at Inside SQ Circle across all social media platforms. If you're a pro wrestling geek like I am, tune in, give us a like and subscribe. And yeah, so thanks again for guys for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words, man. We wouldn't be here without you. So we really appreciate you taking the chance on us. I mean, we could do without Rhett, but we put up with him because he's a pretty smart dude. He's somewhat good looking.
He's the Stone Cold Steve Austin of the show. He's got the head. He's got the hair.
He's the Stone Cold Steve Austin now.
Oh.
I was the Gilbert at one point. It's fine.
At least you're not Lord Tensai anymore. So
it's fair.
That one went right over my head. All right, JT, we appreciate you coming in and dropping some knowledge on Rachaad White. One of the most important metrics that both of you guys dropped was that Rachaad White sucks. I pretty much gave you guys the win there. But let the people know where they can find you and what you got going on inside of fantasy football and outside of fantasy football.
Yeah, you can find me on Shoot the Gap. After this with Jorge, we're talking defensive backs, rookies. So if you're an IDP, jump in and listen to that. If you're a DLF member, I have my IDP rankings there. I also have a series on running backs 1 through 16, the rookies. Ran 1 through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12, and then 13 plus. So that series just dropped this week before the draft. So if you're a member, go over there, check out that. I got kind of where they're going ADP right now, but then I also have my personal where I like them, where I rank them. So go ahead and check that out. Shocker if you read it. I love Ray Davis, so that's in there as well. And then you can always find me on my own show, the Stew with JT Brew. You can look us up on YouTube, Spotify, all that. After the IDP show, I'll be talking fantasy hockey and playoff hockey after that. So late show tonight doing that. So if you are into hockey, check us out on the Stew with JT Brew. We'll be going on probably about 10:30 Central Time tonight, 11:30 Eastern. A late one for us tonight, but we're going on after the IDP show.
Grinding.
Busy man.
Rhett, Drew, any last words before we close the show?
No, sir. I can't wait for the NFL draft next week. So this all this speculation stuff can finally stop.
Yeah, and with all this tight end talk that JT was bringing about Kate Otten, there's only one thing left to say before we go off the air. Free my guy, Durham Smythe.
Oh, I love Durham Smythe. Man, I knew I liked you. Durham Smythe's the man, dude. I got Durham Smythe everywhere. I think I have him on every Dynasty team. I love Durham Smythe. Durham Smythe, man, he's going to actually play a little this year, I think. I think you're going to work him in a little bit more. I know I'm so random on him. If we talk about metrics, he's the non-metric guy. He's not athletic. He's not any of the other stuff, but I love him. I don't like him anyway. I don't care.
This stuff guys will bond over, man.
Durham Smythe and Sean Tucker.
What a
Shout
show.
out to Johnny Woods.
Here we go. We're going off the rails. That's it for us. We appreciate each and every one of you that hopped in, watched, liked the stream, dropped a comment, subscribe to the channel, head over to www.fantasyinframes.com. Appreciate both of the guests that came on, Jorge Edwards and Justin Taylor. For Rhett at R Manuel Sports, for Drew at Drew3MR, I'm Chris Battistel. Toodles.